Hey, everyone. Paul here, Director of Product Design, and
Laura, Technical Support Expert.
Yeah, great to have you all with us from wherever you are in the world. And yeah, we've got some exciting stuff to chat with you and discuss with you today. The long-awaited version 10 firmware, which has been well over a year in the making, believe it or not. It's been a huge amount of work in engineering to make this happen.
Yes. Many requests were sent our way for various features that we've now implemented in this version, and so we're going to be taking the time to walk through them with you here on the stream.
Yeah, and feel free to throw questions in the chat, and we'll get to as many as we can. I mean, we could probably spend all day with you on this, but we've got to get through a lot. So let's start off with one of the most widely requested, if not the most widely requested feature
Probably
of all time.
Yeah, I would say so. So pull out your sunglasses for this one. It's daylight mode. There you go. Can we cut to our Scorpio here? And guess what? Same sort of quick cut you had on the 6 series. Push in both encoders. Wow, look at that. Such a bright screen. I know. We're probably popping out of your computer screen right now. This was a feature that was highly requested. The purpose of this is so that you can see your 8 series display in various conditions. You know, lots of people are out there working in the sun. They wanted higher contrast. And so we implemented this feature after many requests.
Can I try?
Yeah, go for it.
Oh, yeah, that feels good. This isn't even the full brightness right now.
This is true, yeah.
Okay, if you weren't wearing sunglasses, you really need to put on them now because this is a bit like the eclipse and we don't want to damage anyone's retinas. So we're going to turn it up because it's 20% brightness now. So now we're going to turn it up to 100%. And
am I in the...
Should we get everyone to sign a waiver first?
Probably.
No, you are in the right place. There you go, display. There's this new display menu as well, by the way, which has various settings pertaining to display.
I mean, this just might ruin your whole screen. Who knows?
Ta-da.
There it is.
So there's display daylight mode.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, here we'll bring it back down for us.
I know we promised this a while ago, another one of these live stream events, but it's taken a long time to get it right, and we didn't want to put it out the door until it looked absolutely right. So yeah, enjoy. So that's obviously a very important feature for you guys. I want to talk now about another cool feature, playback to outputs. Now, it's been a wide request too, to be able to, when you finish recording a take, to be able to play back the take to make sure it sounds great and to be able to check that it, it's leveled correctly. But at the same time, leave all your live inputs going live to the outputs such that the crew on set don't suddenly get a blast of playback or suddenly their audio is muted if you've set your auto mute to playback, so that they carry on as if nothing's happened. And that we understand that has been quite a big issue for some users out there. So now you have the ability to select what's called a headphones only mode. So what you select to listen to in your headphones during playback will only affect your playback, but leave all the whatever routing you've got to outputs will remain live. Mm-hmm. Unless, of course, you've set your outputs to be fed from the actual headphone left and headphone right sources, then it's going to replicate that. So where do we find these settings first? I'm going to walk you through the screens here. Hopefully we're showing that. So you come into your menu and you go to your outputs menu, and in here you'll find this new menu called playback outputs. Now by default it's all outputs, and this is the mode that you're all familiar with, such that it's just normal routing. When you hit play, you'll actually hear your any ISOs routed to outputs be playback ISOs. The mix that you've recorded, if that's routed to your outputs, that'll be the playback. But if you want those outputs to stay live, then you want playback outputs to be set to headphones only. All right. So once you've made that setting, then you can go into your headphone presets, and as you all know here, you've got like a bunch of factory headphone presets here, but you've also got your user configurable presets, up to 12 of them, and they're all nameable. So let's take a look at one. You'll see a difference here. So if we go into edit here, So the first thing you'll notice that's different is that you have your standard routing matrix here. But we have these two tabs on the bottom of the screen, one called record stop and one called play. And you can switch between them by using this toggle switch here. So it's pretty obvious what it's doing. You can set up your routing for standard record and stop mode. So essentially live inputs mode, where you're recording your live inputs, and in stop mode, you're monitoring your live inputs. And you can set up a routing there. So let's, for instance, come down here and say, yeah, I just want to listen. I'm going to keep this simple. I'm going to say I want my left to go there, and then I'm going to go to my right tab at the top here and set that to be right. Okay, so I'm just monitoring my mix in this particular case, right? And then in play, right now there's nothing routed. So if I was left this preset as is right now and I hit play, I wouldn't hear a thing. All right. So obviously you're going to want to make a change here. So maybe you'd actually just want to make it be a simple, during play I just want to hear the mix tracks that I've recorded. So in which case you have to press this, you hold it until it goes pink. You see a pink background color in that cell. You have to hold it to set it to a track mode. If you just press it on and off like this, such that it's blue, you are still going to be listening to the live bus mix during playback, right? So be sure to set it by holding the button so it goes pink background if you want to hear the playback track there. I could also, if I wanted, say maybe I want to also listen to ISO 1 playback track at the same time in my headphone right. I can then go back to my left tab, and maybe I want ISO 1 playback track in there, but the left playback track there, all right? So what we've got here, and I could come out of this and I could give it a name, whatever I want to give it. Maybe I will just call it something like, I don't know, mix. Just keep it simple for now, just call it mix for now, all right? And I could make that my favorite if I want to. So what this preset will do is when I'm recording and in stop mode, I'm just going to be hearing the live LR bus mix as normal. But when I go into playback, I'm going to be hearing the LR mix, the recorded LR mix, so the playback tracks. But the outputs are going to still remain live. Okay. Now you can do all sorts of weird and wonderful combinations with that playback matrix, and you've got 12 user configurable headphone presets to configure all of these in whichever way you want. One thing you should note though is that with the headphone presets, you have only up to 4 playback tracks that you can select in your playback tab. Okay, so that still gives you a huge range of functions in here. So if I come in here and I select another preset, for instance, and I go to my play tab, and it can be any 4 tracks scattered across your headphone left or headphone right. So work with that that design paradigm, and you'll be fine. Have you got any thoughts on that matter?
I do, yeah. So many a time, if you're used to just operating in the normal headphone presets, you'll just be staying on left-right stereo or left-right mono. In this instance, we would say you have to go and make a headphone preset if you want to make a custom setup like this, because left-right stereo is going to operate in the same way it always did, right?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, so have a good play with that, experiment, and set it up for your particular application, but there's a lot of capability there. All right.
Yeah, so the next sort of thing is another one of these features that we've introduced just for more flexibility. That's always what we're aiming for, giving people the opportunity to change things around with their settings. And this is another highly requested feature, which is the ability to rename your record folder. So if we were to go to the take list, let's just use the shortcut of the menu button plus the headphone encoder. And I needed to rename my record folder. I can go into record folder here. I know this is the current folder we're within, operating within, putting every take we list into there. So if I go to options, here's our new feature of renaming the folder. So I could go in here, let's say I messed up. Let's imagine we're on set right now. I accidentally set it as day 4 when we're on day 5. And so I need to come in
Time
here.
goes quickly, doesn't
Yeah,
it?
exactly. I got to come in here and change it to day 5, save that. And that way I don't have to create a new folder and then figure things out with, the DIT later on saying I recorded some in here and some in the other. I just am able to immediately change that
And this
folder.
was only possible before by actually doing it on a computer. Right?
Exactly, yeah.
So now you've got the ability to do it here. It just makes it very simple and quick. All
Yep.
right. All right. So what else are we going to talk about here? Oh, yeah. So this is just a small minor thing that's maybe got lost in our sort of when we sort of announced version 10 and everything. But we've got this new feature, which, you're probably all familiar with the fact that, let's just go back to the way it was originally so people are familiar. So, I'll just come back down here quick. All right. So everyone knows that, in your main screen here at the very top of the display, it's always shown your current take. And in this case, 1000 take 03. That's, in this case, the take that I've just recorded. So if I play that back, it's going to play back take 1000 take 03, right? And then when I'm recording, it's showing you the currently recording take. And then when I stop, I can then play back that currently recorded take. But I've always had the ability, if I in stop mode, to press the stop button and hold the button, and it will tell me what the next take name will be just by holding it. Okay, so that's like a momentary action. You have to hold it for it to display that. Well, we've had quite a few requests over the years to, no, I always want to see what the next take is. So all you do now to enable that is go to your record play menu, scroll down to the bottom, and there's something here called next take display. And you can switch it away from the default stop momentary setting, which you're all familiar with, to stop latching. Now it's going to latch on when I press that. And it will toggle between the current and that. So now, as I record, notice while I'm recording, it's showing you what I'm currently recording, because you're not really interested in the next take at this point.
Yeah.
But when I press stop, and it stops, it does automatically drop back to the next take. So immediately you can see what's coming up next. Now, this is only half the story, because where this starts to become really useful is when you configure your toggle switch actions or your MIDI controller that you're using with a shortcut, a MIDI map shortcut, to basically set to your what's called follow modes. Okay, so let me explain this in a bit more detail because it's hard to describe. But if I go down to say, let's say we want to create a shortcut on my star toggle switch here. So I'm going to go down to my system menu here, and I'm going to go to my toggle switch action, and I'm going to come to my star toggle. And okay, I've got all of these different options for the star toggle, but I'm going to set that to be a shortcut to naming scene name. And I've got this new option called follow stop. We do still have these current take and next take options for scene and name, and likewise for take, number. So for your notes, take number and scene name, you now have a current option, a next option, and this new follow stop option. So let's for now put it to that and see how that operates. So right now we're showing the next take. Let's move that star toggle and see what happens. Notice immediately it brings up the next take scene name. So I can jump straight to naming the next take. Great, perfect. What about now if I switch that display to show the current take? Now that same toggle switch is going to allow me to name the current take. Now this really does make it much easier, because now it's much more intuitive, in my opinion, that whatever you're displaying there, hitting that toggle switch is going to name what you're looking at. And you can do this not just for the scene name, but as I've said, you can also do it for your notes and take number much faster, and it also saves you a toggle switch for other things.
And this would also work too with your CL16. If you had hit the stop button and then you needed to toggle switch on and off, it's almost as if you're holding down like a shift key, or an alt key, but you don't have to keep holding it down. It's just the one-time hit, and we're holding, shift, but in this case stop, and going in and out of selecting. Oh, messing up our scene name here.
Yeah. So, yeah. I mean, again, really, really try this, because I think it's going to improve your daily workflow and relieve some stress on set for knowing that you're in the right place. In addition to the CL16, by the way, if you have just any MCU controller that we support, you can map any button you like on those controllers to this follow mode as well. All right, let's move on to...
We've got a little short one.
A little short one. I'm going to do this one because it's
Go
short.
for it.
So, yeah, I mean, this is cool. I can't even demonstrate it on here right now.
Well, we have a smart battery we can use.
Okay,
we
plug
go.
it in.
We'll just swap out our main power source here on the fly.
Okay.
Switch it to...
Okay, so we've just plugged in a smart battery now, and we've just selected the smart battery as the power source. Okay, so now we're getting precise data directly from the battery in terms of duration, runtime remaining, and temperature and stuff. So if I go into the smart battery data menu, ta-da, we now have this Farrenheit or Farrenheit mode. Just in case you can't do the 9 divided by 4 plus 32 calculation in your head, which I can do, but some people can't do. Blah, 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 blah. It's because I lived in the UK and America for sometimes I've learned how to switch, like driving from the right to the left on the road. I can
just in time for Memorial Day. We've got Farrenheit mode, so shout out to all the Americans out there.
Moving on to something a bit more serious here. Let's talk about output timecode and...
Here, I'll swap these back over.
And, output timecode, playback timecode.
Yes, okay.
An important one.
Another highly requested feature. So you've got this 5-pin LEMO connection on the right-hand side of your Scorpio, right next to your Bluetooth antenna. And this outputs timecode and takes in timecode for syncing to various boxes or a camera or what have you. If we go and visit the timecode/sync menu now, you'll see there's a new feature here that says output playback timecode. Prior to version 10.0, whenever you had a timecode source connected here at the 8 series, it would output whatever timecode was currently applicable. So when we're sitting here and we're not recording, it's outputting the timecode value here at the bottom. When we're on playback and we've got a different timecode value at the bottom, it was outputting the playback value. With this option now introduced, you can choose to either have it output that playback timecode when you're in playback or continuously send the jammed value that you have in your machine.
Why is that so important?
It's so important because there are cases where people are live feeding timecode using the 8 series as their master TC clock, and they need to keep it going even if they're in playback playing something back for someone on set. So it's a way to keep a value there all the time, not having to explain to someone, oh, sorry, that's why that jumped, and then went back to the normal timecode. So that's a feature. You turn on or off right there in the timecode sync menu.
All right. Perfect. Okay, let's talk about another important feature. So many of you 8 series users, you'll know that we've had this feature called auto stop, which is like not auto stop, AutoMute, which is like a transport dependent mute capability on each of your outputs. So you could set up your routing in your analog outputs here. For instance, here at the bottom we can see, do you want it to auto mute in record mode, that X1 output, or in stop mode, or in play mode, or all 3 modes? You could always do that here. So the feature's been here on the analog outputs for some time, and the AS outputs, but we haven't had that feature on the Dante and USB outputs. So now you have that there too, which is very useful. So come into Dante menu and you can see those same options there, and likewise in your USB outputs as well. So if you're doing some sort of virtual streaming event to a remote location, you can set all of that up as well. All right. Okay, what's next, Laura?
Well, our next one is a massive feature that we've introduced for tablets running SD remote, which is our routing matrix. And we have a tablet here hooked up via HDMI so we can show you on stream what we've got going on. Can we cut to that and talk about it now?
Okay. So hopefully everyone can see that. Here's SD remote that I'm sure most of you are familiar with, the standard screens here. I'm currently hooked up to a Scorpio. All right, so I'm sure you're all familiar with this screen here. So you can come here along the bottom, you can see this new routing tab here, And this is a feature that is only available on tablets, both Android and iOS. It was too difficult to make it sort of usable on a small screen of a phone. So yeah, this is only available on a tablet. So when you go into routing tab, you'll see, well, let's just show you what it looks like fully collapsed. Okay, so here you can see you've got your destinations as columns along the top here. So we've got buses, analog outputs, AES outputs, Dante outputs, and USB outputs. And then in your rows, the from sources, we have channels, buses, and returns. And you can see we have these like expansion plus boxes here where you can open up the matrix or any part of the matrix. So the reason why we did it this way is you don't always need to see the entire matrix, right? Because especially with a Scorpio, when you had so many channels, so many buses, so many Dante outputs, so many digital outputs, so many outputs, and so many different sources, this can become like a huge affair. Mm-hmm. You can see all that. I can open all of these up and sort of swipe and keep going. And you can see that this can really be a massive, massive matrix. So you can scroll along. But if you're only interested in a few aspects of it, you can collapse it. And you can do the same here with your sources. So here's our channels. In the case of the Scorpio, 32, right? And remember, with the 8 series, you can also have buses as sources. You can configure your buses and then choose which actual physical outputs you want them routed to, whether they're analog outputs, Dante outputs, USB outputs. And then also the other sources we have are returns. And again, like I said, you can expand those out so you can see everything, or just collapse if you're not interested in a particular section of the matrix. So let's just take a look here at a reduced part of the matrix. In fact, let me just also introduce you to this little switch here called multiple tabs. This is your friend. So right now I've got that enabled, it's highlighted, and that enables me to say, yes, I can have multiple tabs open, as I've just shown you, right? But in some cases, yeah, I can close everything manually, but in some cases, you only want to show one tab at a time. So notice if I select analog outs now, it's going to only open analog outs and collapse all the other tabs, right? So that means it's just making it easier. If I open buses here, if I then open channels, it's going to collapse my buses. So use the multiple tabs if you only want to show one source row and destination column at a time. Okay, so let's take a look at just a simple setup here. But this is like the default routing configuration that you get here. So channels down here, and you can see that all the channels, 1 through 32, are routed to the mix left and mix right bus by default. And the orange cell refers to post-fade routing, right? You can also see that by default, all of these channels are routed to buses, but via a bus send independent gain value. Okay,
yep. So this would be like factory default on your 8 series.
This is factory default.
Yep.
So obviously I can come in here and disable all this routing, and when a cell is grey, that means you're not routing anything. So channel 1 in this particular case is going to my mix left right, but it's not going to any buses, right? Maybe I want to send channel 1 also to bus 3 because that's like an IFB feed to a crew member on set. Now notice as I keep tapping the same cell, it alternates between off, grey, green, which is pre-fade, orange is post-fade, and if you're routing to buses, you also have that independent send gain value. Okay, so really useful. I can also, let's take a look at my analog outs here. If I want an analog, say channel 2, to go to, I don't know, let's say X5, I can enable that, and now it's going pre-fade or post-fade. There's no send gain in this bus send gain because the output is not a bus, but you can definitely route things pre-fade or post-fade. All right, so you've got all of that flexibility. Now, notice also in our channel sources down the left-hand column here, that it also shows you the actual physical input source that is selected for that channel. Okay, so mic 1 here. Now, if I wanted to change that, you just simply tap on channel 1. It's going to take you directly to the channel 1 setup screen, and then you just come into your source screen and then select a different source here. Okay, from whatever you need. All right. So let's select Dante 3 for instance. Okay, come in here, and now I can go back to my routing menu, and now it's showing the correct source set. So you can always immediately see what physical input is there. Let's put that back to mic 1 because I want to bring that up again shortly. Okay. Very, very fast to navigate. All right. So let's open buses again. All right. So you can see how flexible that is. What else is there to say?
I think a key point on this as well is if you're forgetting what these colors correspond with, you can always PFL one of your channels and see an example to know the guide. Because this routing matrix you're seeing on your tablet is the exact same thing as this input channel source page, or here, I'll go to my buses, sorry, as this bus routing page so that we match what I've got right here. Channel 1 bus sends, you can see how this matches exactly what we have set up in channel 1 there. We only have left and right routed as post fade, and we have this little guide along the bottom of the screen to say pre is green, post is orange, and send is that blue color. Another important thing I think we should touch on is the fact that this send is variable. Right? So if I go into channel 1 bus sends here and say I want to send something out on B1 and set it to that blue color, if you scroll back up to the top, I think they should match now on channel 1. See how I've just highlighted that light blue there on bus 1? Well, how much gain do you want to send? That's where you would have to go into your bus sends and set a value of how much I want to send into bus 1. So a lot of people who are coming from other sound devices gear, this whole bus routing options, especially if you're coming from 6 series where you route directly to outputs, this is a whole new terrain for you.
It's more like a digital console.
Very much so.
Where everything goes via buses, and then you select your outputs to be whatever bus source. One other thing I'd like to mention here, I spoke about a shortcut to your channel screens here. You can also do the same with your buses.
Ah, there you go.
Did you know that?
I didn't know that. I just learned something live on stream,
so
guys.
Yeah, if you want to go up and set up a bus, I can just jump to say, touch that bus, and then you've got all those sources here. You can set up mutes and different configurations, bus gains, name your bus, and all that sort of stuff here. So yeah, pretty flexible. And I think you can do that with outputs as well. Yeah, you can do that with outputs too.
Yeah.
Analog outputs.
Yeah, so it's almost giving you a bigger screen to the the structure that's already built within your 8 series.
So I think, again, it's one of those things, try it, and I think this is going to become your best friend on set, and you'll probably end up not being able to live without it, because, there are so many routing cross points in the 8 series. This is a wonderful overview of all of that.
We did have one question come in on the stream that I want to reference.
Sure.
For low channel count talking head interview days, would it be possible to offer a larger graphic view of left, right, and the 1 to 3, like channels 1 through 3 meter views, like the 6 series, rather than the current left, right, 1 through 8 view? I think this is important to know. What 8 series machine are you operating on? Because this is available on the 833.
Absolutely, yeah.
On the Scorpio, I believe you are limited to left, right, 1 through 8, right?
Try it.
Let's see. No, actually, look at this. Live on stream, guys. Scroll all the way down in the meter view
to, you need to do your homework.
To left, right, 1 to 3, horizontal view. Let's see. And I'll switch it in the meter screen as well. Let's see.
There it is.
Aha, there you go. So
a 32-channel Scorpio acting as an 833.
You've got it right there. So if you are Carl, who has written this in the chat, if you are referencing this view, there you are. If there's anything else specific related to this, just let us know.
While we're on the subject of meter views, I'm going to hook up. Can you turn, is that 833 on?
Here, I'll connect the smart battery.
Okay, we're just going to turn on an 833 sitting on the side of the desk here. Okay, because I want to now switch away from the Scorpio SD remote interface. I mean, they're all pretty much the same. obviously different 8 series have different numbers of inputs and outputs and buses, so they configure themselves differently. So are you on the SD remote still, Matt? Showing that good. So here we go I'm going to switch away from my Scorpio to my 833, which is up here. So we're going to Bluetooth into that. And here's our 833. Okay. And you can see that this is fewer tabs, fewer meter views, because we've got less channels to deal with. But notice this new tab down the bottom, almost as frequently requested as daylight mode.
Yeah. This was a fan favorite.
A fan favorite. So here you've got it. If you have on your 833 the expansion, the +4 expansion license to turn your 8-channel 833 into a 12-channel 833, you will have this 1 through 12 option. So let's tab that. There you go. Look at that. Isn't that cool?
Seeing all your channels at once.
All your channels at once with, if you want, your trim and faders on each channel. All right. You don't have to have those, as I'm sure you know. You can come in here and say hide faders and hide channel faders and hide channel trims and things like that. But there you have it. I hope that really helps you all out there. Okay, any other subjects we've got?
Well, we do have one subject which people are probably, chomping at the bit about, which is 32-bit float.
Yeah, 32-bit float. So this has been a very popular request. As you know, we were the first company to introduce 32-bit float technology into the audio industry. I don't know, 3 years ago?
Longer than
4
that.
years ago?
Yeah.
I don't know, time just flies so quick. So, and with the 8 series, the hardware was always designed from the very, very outset to be able to support 32-bit floating point technology, because that does require very sort of very foundational hardware to make that happen. And these 8 series are primarily aimed at sort of the production sound for TV and film and reality show, where perhaps there was not as big a desire for that technology. But
Sure.
There are actually many reasons for why 32-bit float technology can also be of a huge benefit to production sound mixes, and I'm going to go over some of those in a minute. But first, I want to talk a little bit about 32-bit float, because really the term 32-bit float is a little bit of a misnomer, because for it to work effectively, it's not just about packing data into a 32-bit float WAV file format. Mm-hmm. For it to work effectively, you have to have a very wide dynamic range hardware input stage. It's very much dependent on the hardware. It's not a software thing. And what does that mean? Well, it means two things. It means you need a very wide dynamic range mic preamp, and you also need a very wide dynamic range analog to digital conversion stage. Those two things are all in the analog domain before you get to the digits where the 32-bit float math can operate. Mm-hmm. So 32-bit float in point is totally pointless if you do not have incredibly precise and wide dynamic range preamps and ADC conversion. And it just so happens that the 8 series has that. The preamps in here are probably, well, I'm going to say definitely the lowest noise preamps we've ever developed. I would say almost like I don't know, probably about getting on for 20 dBs lower noise floor than our 788.
Wow.
Yeah. And also, when you're talking about dynamic range, you're talking about the noise floor, what's the lowest noise floor, and what the absolute highest level that preamp can take before it clips.
Yeah.
Right? So again, the preamps in here can handle like huge signal level, much higher than pretty much the majority of mics on the entire market can deliver. So what that means is your microphone itself is going to clip well before the mic preamp is going to clip on here. The noise floor of your microphone is going to be higher than the noise floor of the preamp. So we've got this giant window here, it's like over 140 dBs, where you can fit sort of any dynamic range that will come out of any microphone. Does that make sense? So, and it's not just about the mic preamp, it's also about the analog to digital conversion stage that I mentioned before. And there are no single analog to digital converters on the market which can handle that wide dynamic range output from our mic preamp. The only way to achieve that is with multiple stacked ADCs, analog to digital converters. And that technology is to make stacked ADCs effective is actually a very difficult technology to make happen, because you basically have to run signal in parallel to all these different converters and seamlessly switch between these converters, but based on threshold levels. But to do that effectively with like a totally invisible noise transition is a very difficult thing to do. And some companies have tried doing it and not very effectively. We spent years doing this and we actually have a patent on our methodology, and you can read that patent online if you're mathematically inclined. We're certainly not going to give all our secret sauce away, because that's a lot of hard work there. But if you want to know more, please find that patent online. So yes, we do have the ability to bring this full dynamic range through our preamp into the through the ADC conversion stage and into our 32-bit float mix engine and 32-bit file float wrapper. So yeah, what this means is, let's talk a little bit about applications now.
Sure.
And feel free to interrupt me, by the way,
It's okay.
at any point. What this means, let's talk about some applications. Yes, the obvious ones are special effects. Effects gathering, like if you're going, capturing a jet flyover, where you get one attempt, or maybe you're capturing a thunderstorm, right, where you're capturing little raindrops, and then suddenly a loud crack of thunder, where the dynamic range can be absolutely huge. It can be 140 dB, or whatever it is. So you only get one attempt at this. You can't do a rehearsal with the weather. You can't do a rehearsal with a jet flying over. You've just got to be able to have a rough idea and get the right level. So in these unpredictable trim gain scenarios, where do you set your gain? Well, for those scenarios, it doesn't really matter when you have such a great mic preamp, great ADC stage, and you have 32-bit float. It doesn't matter where you set the gain, because the gain is all digital. It's all post ADC. So you can actually crank it up. So you're actually recording at normal levels. And if you clip, so maybe you set it up to record, make the raindrops look healthy on your meters, or the distant jet show healthy on your meters. It doesn't matter if it goes over the top, because with 32-bit float you can exceed 0 dBFS, and you are able then in post-production to bring those signals that are way above 0 dBFS, and I'm talking about even up to 750 dBs over the top, to bring those signals down to below 0 dBFS. I'm sure most of you have read the articles and understand all that, but it's true, it really works, and you can debate this all you like on the internet, but there are many applications where you don't always have control of your trim gain. You don't know. Another one is a bag drop, right? You throw it in a car, or what,
and it drives away.
And like you have no control. Yeah, maybe you've got SD remote in a follow car and you can control gain that way.
Sure, yeah.
But sometimes there are just situations where you don't know. 32-bit float is great for that. But here's where I'm going to throw something at you that you're going to go, oh, this is never important for capturing dialogue. It's not important. Well, there is a real benefit for that too. I'm not saying it's it's a necessary tool, 32-bit float, for dialogue recording in all scenarios. In fact, I think 24-bit does great in most scenarios. But let me just give you the biggest benefit of 32-bit float in dialogue. And that is not typically a production sound mixer when they're recording dialogue, especially unscripted, where, you know, the talent can go from whispers to shouting, and maybe even in episodic work, you know, they might get a little bit more passionate in the actual real take as opposed to the rehearsal.
I was almost going to share a story about that with the 702. So when I was first learning about sound mixing, I went and did a short film with the 702. Pretty simple setup. We did a full rehearsal with this very dramatic scene. Someone finds someone dead in the bathtub. They walk into the room and have their reaction. We did the rehearsal. The woman opens the door. She silently cries at the person in the bathtub and sort of weeps. All right, I set all my levels for that scene. We go for the real take. The woman opens the door and screams at the dead body in the bathtub.
Oh my God.
I said, we have to do this one again. If I had had 32-bit float on those ISO tracks, I would have been fine, and we could have gone with that first great take, which was very emotional. She had to work herself up for that scene. But, you know, in that moment, you set up for the rehearsal. That's all you know. And then it comes into the actual scene, and that happens.
And that's a really good point, how technology can help you capture better art.
Exactly.
Right? You are able to keep that really emotive performance.
Yes.
She might get an Oscar for that performance. That
Exactly.
second take,
Yeah.
she might have lost it.
Yep.
All down to 32-bit float. Anyway, so let's talk about how this is possible now. Because, like, okay, typically production sound mixers, I mean, everyone's going to vary to a certain extent, but it's pretty typical that when you're recording dialogue, you're going to set up your nominal levels to somewhere like minus 20 dBFS on your meters. You're going to, with the idea that, you know, average peaks from there maybe are going to go up to like minus 12-ish, like 8 dBs higher. And then you'll typically set a limiter, right? An analog limiter, which are really good on the 8 series, to sort of maybe cut in at about minus 3 or minus 4 dBFS. You've got the flexibility where you want to set the threshold. And you set those limiters there because it's a bit of protection against those overtly emotive moments or unpredictable moments. You just want to ensure about not getting any digital clipping, which is the worst type of distortion there is out there, and it's not recoverable from. So you throw limiters on there, and good limiters give a great end result. They'll capture that peak and stop the digital clipping. Great. So I think we'd all generally be in agreement that's the way production sound mixers work. But perfectionists that we all are in terms of capturing audio, all of us are really looking to capture audio exactly as it is in its pure form. And limiters, sadly, even good ones, by their very nature, add distortion. They're compressing the sound. It's no longer linear. It's just a fact. That's about limiters. And we trade off that because we prefer the sound of limiter compression to digital clipping, right?
Absolutely.
So think of 32-bit floating point as an alternative to a limiter. You can now turn off your limiter, avoid that compression distortion, and capture the full dynamic range of your emotive performance from a whisper to a scream. It doesn't matter if it goes over 0 dBFS now. Now, having the argument normally against that is, but I can still do that with 24-bit. And I just turn my trim gains right down. And that's very common. Yes, you can. And you can still carry on with 24-bit with limiters. We've been doing it for years and it works fine. But there might be some applications where you really want to capture that full dynamic range. And I'm sure some high-end post houses the dialogue editors and the audio editors would love to have that unprocessed, clean, full dynamic range audio, right?
Absolutely.
Rather than, I mean, it's like when you send audio with EQ baked in, the ISOs. They don't like that. They just want to deal. They want to be the ones to do the compression. They want to be the ones to deal with EQ, which is fair comment.
And one of the biggest notes, too, about being a production sound mixer in this day and age is providing options. So simply by us enabling this feature and allowing you to use it on your 8 series is giving you the option to use this thing.
Yeah.
You know, you don't have to use it, but if there's a scenario where it works for you, say a production asks for it, you have the ability to now provide it.
So, yeah, you could do the same with 24 button. If you didn't want limiters to engage, you could work with a lot more headroom. But you'd have to be working with about 40 to 50 dBs of headroom to cope with that full range, dynamic range of the voice. That means you'd be peaking virtually not at all on your meters. And yeah, it would work. But here's the downside of that. And that is, number one, if you're setting up your nominal levels to be about minus 40, minus 50 dB. Number one is you're hardly going to be able to hear it in your headphones, even if you crank up your headphone monitoring to full bore. And there's the headphone amps on the 8 series can produce a lot.
Pretty
but
powerful.
even so, it's not going to, if you're peaking that low, it's not ideal at all. So that's one reason. The second reason is that if you were to deliver these files to post-production and they're sort of nominally around the minus 40, minus 50 mark, you might get some post-editor who's not so familiar. They'd open these files up in their timeline and go, there's nothing there. What have they done? And they would just, sadly, it's the real world where some don't investigate this more in depth and they'll just reject the files, or you might get an angry call, what's going on? So there's that reason. And then there's the third reason, that if you are working in 24-bit and you're peaking to around minus 50, you're probably only using like the bottom like 14 or 15 bits. And so you're actually not getting as good. So quantization noise is actually going to sort of be more dominant at that point. It's going to be like you're recording in 16-bit at that point. So there is a benefit to using, with 32-bit float, you don't have that issue. You still have the full precision of your signal to noise all the way down, even when you're recording very low level. So this is a reason why you want to still in 32-bit float. And this is a big recommendation. I've written this in the user guide as well. There's a whole bunch of recommendations, by the way, which I really advise everyone to read before they start using 32-bit float. But as professionals, you still should be gain staging in exactly the same way that you would with 24-bit. It's not taking your job away. Still gain stage in the same way, because you want to deliver the sort of levels that post-production want.
Absolutely.
All right?
Yeah.
As I've said before, the main advantage here is that instead of using limiters, you're using the 32-bit float technology to allow you to not worry about that digital clipping. Okay, so anything else you want to say on this matter?
Yeah, I think really what you said there is that you're trading one feature for another. So there's an attitude oftentimes in terms of a bag drop rig where it's set it and forget it. That's the phrase that gets used. Set a gain level that you kind of guess at for what it's going to be and then never touch it again. But if you're using this for dialogue, in an actual film production or a TV series or whatnot, you still want to be doing all the same stuff that you normally would.
Right.
That's essentially what Paul's getting at there. So.
Okay, enough talking now. Should we get in and show
Yeah,
them
let's
how to
show
do
them how
this?
to turn it on.
Okay, so it's very simple, really. And like as we're showing you this, it will make sense. So you go to your record play menu, and notice you've got the normal bit depth menu that you have here. And this applies essentially to your mix tracks. Okay, so whatever you set here, this applies to mix tracks. So we haven't really said yet that the 32-bit float technology here only applies to your ISOs. So you can record your ISOs 32-bit float. You don't have to obviously record your mix, but if you record your mix along with it, you can record those at the same time as 22-bit, wow, as 24-bit. Okay, so this is where you set up your bit depth, which is your standard bit depth for everything in the same way that you've normally normally works. But
Yep.
if you then scroll down to your track to media routing menu, which you're probably all familiar with, we've got this one other box here. Now, 32-bit float is, let's just set this up, okay? I'm just going to, because there are some limitations on how many media that you can record to, right? Let's get rid of that, and let's just get rid of that, okay, for now. So you'll see that this box down here is currently grayed out because, and the reason for that is because now you can see the 32-bit float box available. And the reason for this is you can only record to 2 media for 32-bit float, all right?
Do you want to say why that is? You can only record to 2?
It's a data rate thing.
Okay.
Okay. So you still have your main recording and a backup recording.
There you
go. But for optimal performance, 2 media works better.
Okay.
But the nice thing about this allows you to record all the way up to 96K at 32-bit float as well, across all 32 ISO tracks.
Yeah.
So that's pretty cool, right? So we put in this limitation to allow you to still use 32-bit float at 96K across all tracks.
Yeah.
All right.
So now that this is, available to us, we can enable it there.
Yeah, and notice the way it's shown here is you've got this cell and there's this vertical line that goes up through the ISO boxes. And that's basically telling you that this 32-bit only applies to the ISOs. If your left and right are enabled at the same time, they will be dependent upon the bit depth that you've selected in this menu here. So in this case, 24-bit.
Sure.
Okay. So that 24-bit, when you deliver to post-production, right, the non-linear editors could still work with a standard 24-bit mix. The good thing about 24-bit is it is widely accepted in even sort of cheap consumer programs, like the Finder and Explorer and things like that. They'll go to Playback 24-bit, no problem. With 32-bit float, cheap consumer applications may not be able to handle that. But just to set any fears aside, pretty much all modern non-linear editing software, Avid, Premiere Pro, or digital audio workstations, DAWs like Pro Tools, Nuendo, whatever, they all can handle 32-bit float files generated from 8 series and mixed pre-series. They will all ingest those files, no problem. And they can even ingest both types simultaneously. So if you've delivered 32-bit float and 24-bit mix at the same time, they can import both of those onto the timeline. They can auto sync them, even though they're different bit depths.
Yeah.
And they can then export those and then work with those files. So they have access to the full dynamic range ISOs. Even if they're clipping, they can bring down the clip level if they are distorting, or not distorting, but exceeding 0 dBFS. So the workflow is actually much simpler than you think, and all the post-production tools are capable of handling them.
So in this case, when we've got our ISOs recording in 32-bit float, but then we're also additionally recording our left-right mix, can we set limiters on our left and right buses?
Yep. So yeah, that's a very good point actually. So when you're doing 32-bit float ISOs, essentially think of it as, yes, I'm recording raw signal. So they are always recorded pre-fade, all right? There's never any limiters on your ISOs. Having said that, you can still apply limiters, and those limiters will affect the ISO feeds going into the mix bus, right?
So next up in the chain, if we're drawing it out for you.
So you'll still see the limiters showing up on your ISOs as activating if your limiters are active, but it's showing you, yes, this is the
ISO
limiter
sends.
activity ISO sends into your mix bus.
Got it.
And that will also affect your headphone monitoring as well. So yeah, you might want to leave your limiters on always, even in 32-bit float mode. You should just be assured that your ISOs are actually being recorded neat. The other things that your ISOs are going to be recorded neat of, or totally won't be affected by EQ.
Mm-hmm.
They won't be affected by compression, limiters, noise assist. All right, so any audio process like that, the only things that will affect the ISOs are your high pass filters,
Okay.
delay in input delay,
Mm-hmm.
and phase. All right. So yeah, there you have it.
Another question on 32-bit float is, can this be communicated across our USB connection into a live program if we're using our USB output routing and sending this into a, say some DAW or program of sorts?
That I am not going to provide an answer on right now.
Okay.
So the question is, well, no, I do know the answer right now. Right now, there is no 32-bit float on the USB outputs.
Okay.
Or the digital outputs. Well, the Dante doesn't support 32-bit
Yeah.
float anyway. USB does
Mm-hmm.
with certain computers and systems. Our system does not advertise itself as a 32-bit float device right
Yeah.
now. That's not to say that we couldn't do that in the future,
Sure.
but it's
Yeah.
a feature request.
There we go. An answer for you.
Okay, while we're just talking about here, so yeah, we've already spoken about that with 32-bit float, you have two media that you can record to, up to 96K,
Mm-hmm.
all tracks. Your buses and all your buses are still at 24-bit fixed,
Mm-hmm.
and you can still run noise assist and mix assist and your auto mixers and compression, all that, and all of that will affect what's going into your recorded buses.
Yeah.
So you still get the benefits there,
Mm-hmm.
right? So still use those things. Yeah, I mean, another thing that's important to know is that when we are on 32-bit float, you'll see this field at the bottom of the screen, which is typically our frame rate indicator.
Mm-hmm.
It will tell you that you're in this 32-bit float mode. So it's like flashing at you every couple of seconds.
Mm-hmm.
So you can always glance there to make sure that you're in the bit depth mode that you want to be in.
And
right?
I think too, in terms of file type, just because we didn't say it while we were on this page, if we go back to track to media routing, these are separate poly files, meaning when we make a recording here, we're not going to have one singular file that has, contained within it like a 24-bit and a 32-bit thing.
That's not possible.
Exactly. They have to be separated. So if you're a person who typically uses this all setting and you want to try out this 32-bit float ISO option, please note you have to turn off all and make sure they're separately highlighted as ISO and left-right.
Correct. Yeah. The other thing is that when you're in 32-bit float, there's no AAC mode. Again, it's a limitation that when we enable 32-bit float, the AAC cannot support 32-bit float. So, and there's reasons why the AAC can't be at the same as a 24-bit at this stage. A few other recommendations that I do want to go through. I do feel that 32-bit float will, this is my personal opinion, but I know there's many other people that agree with this, that this is early days. As someone put it on the internet yesterday, I can't remember who, it's sort of like a bit like the undiscovered country in the professional post-production world. So it's very important right now that you liaise with post-production if you're going to deliver 32-bit float. If you can't communicate with post-production about it, I would basically work with 24-bit to just so that's what they're familiar with, or deliver both. Have two machines doing one and doing another. But I think that's important. Have the communication with post. I do believe that over time, dialogue editors are going to start to say, yeah, we just want this. We don't want ISOs with limiters on them. As they start to experience what this means for them, the demand is going to grow. Absolutely. I'm going to start to talk to more post-production companies and let them experience this as well and see how they see the benefit of that. As we've mentioned before, even with 32-bit float, just continue to gain stage as you normally would. Don't start cranking your trim gains. I'm going, hey, I'm going to deliver plus 200 dBFS files to post now because I can. You know, you're going to lose your job. Just deliver normal files, and those occasional clips which exceed 0 dBFS, don't worry about it. Posts are just going to end up with, wow, these sound great. What's happened? Yeah, as we mentioned before, carry on enabling your limiters. They won't affect your 32-bit ISOs, but they will affect your monitoring and what's going into the mixes as well. All right. This is all, by the way, in the user guide. I'm just reading it. I'm allowed to read it verbatim because I actually wrote this stuff. I shouldn't have volunteered that information. Anyway, yeah, so have a read. And any questions coming in on any of that stuff?
We had a few. We kind of went through them as we were touching on different things. There was a question about comparing between 16-bit versus 24 versus 32. If there's any sort of analogy that comes to mind with comparing those three. I think 32 is kind of a whole different world in terms of...
I think people understand bit depth a bit more visually, right? So when they see how that affects actual video.
Yeah.
Or photography.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I guess you just have to think about how many, if you have really low number of pixels on your photo, you're going to see sort of like these sort of like square sort of like artifacts when you start to zoom in, and it's not going to look good, right? It's pretty much the same with audio and bit depth. So
yeah,
that's the best. Simplest.
Yeah, you're not using your eyes, you're using your ears, I guess.
Yeah.
And the thing is, too, it depends on what people can tell, because from my experience, it seems that people have a different ability in terms of being able to determine the quality of the tracks being played back. You know, if you play someone a CD quality thing of 16-bit 44.1, I'm not volunteering to say I can hear the difference directly between, you know, that and a 24-bit 48K file.
Yeah.
So,
well, but it all comes down to, as users and production sound mixers and audio engineers who are capturing material, that's right at the start of the chain. They use their best mics they can find.
Yeah.
Everything's mic placement is still the number one. Choice of mic and mic placement is still the number one thing.
Absolutely, yeah.
The production sound mixer needs to do. I just want to qualify that. All of this tech that handles the next part of the chain is less important. It's still important, absolutely, but it's not the most important thing. It's, what was I saying? I don't know. But it's really important that you, as someone who's capturing the source, you're capturing it as clean and in the best way you can, with the widest dynamic range, lowest noise, and with. So we're all about the people on the front end of that part of the work of the production. You've got to start off with that full dynamic range.
Absolutely, yeah.
Because this is going to end up further down the line. It's going to end up being compressed to MP4 and all of these things. If you start off with already compressed material, by the time it gets to the end user and they're listening through their TVs or listening to the audio on a CD, it's not going to sound good.
Yeah.
So as professionals, we have to start off by giving production, post-production, the editors, everything, and then let them make that call.
Absolutely. And when it comes to being able to like hear the difference between these different settings, it's more important, again, about the options you are providing. Because if someone's going to manipulate a track, so you deliver a 32-bit float track that has this crazy dynamic range from whisper to a scream, they're going to be able to more easily manipulate that than they would, 16-bit or 24-bit file. So it's more about the purpose of where it's going, right, than you making two recordings and playing back in your headphones and seeing if you can tell the difference between the two. That's not necessarily what the feature's about.
Cool. I'm just wondering if there's any other things that we've forgotten to talk about.
It looks like we've covered everything on our list, so...
Any questions from the world?
Yeah, that's pretty much it from our chat here. I will say, if anybody has any further questions after this stream or rewatching this stream, feel free to let us know at Sound Devices Support. You can visit our website, sounddevices.com, click on the support option, send us a message, let us know what your questions are. Hold on, we're getting a message here from headquarters. Oh, and also, if you want to update your machine to version 10.01 now, head over to sounddevices.com and click on the downloads option. I believe it's products, downloads. Click on your product, and then you can get the file to update.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, Laura.
Yeah, thanks, Paul.
And we'll see you at the next one.
That's it.
See you, folks. Thanks for joining us all.